What is going on, all you wonderful A-plussers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again with another review for you, this time on My Adventures with Superman, episode number 8, Zero Day, Part 1. Another really good episode. In fact, I'd say probably one of the better ones of the season. So in this episode, Clark gets a brand new superpower. This time, his super hearing finally comes in. And of course, because it is Clark Kent, he can't just, accept this new power and then just kind of like live every day, like normal. No, he has to really embrace this new superpower, and he uses it to constantly help people, and never really getting to take a break for himself. At first is a good thing, because the first couple of things that he does is very important. Like, for one, he, rescues a father and her child from a burning building. He then stops a car that has, the brakes not working. So he's definitely saving a lot more lives this way. But unfortunately, because he has such a moral obligation to himself to constantly be there for other people, he also starts not putting, his own like personal health, not really taking any consideration into that. So he's basically getting zero sleep and just kind of stressing himself out. And unfortunately, when Jimmy sees this, at first Jimmy's like a little bit concerned, but then he sees the views that his YouTube channel is suddenly getting flamebird, and this makes him kind of just want to let Clark continuously do what he's doing. And then meanwhile, at the Daily Planet, we have a new character being introduced, and that is Vicki Vale. Vicki Vale is supposedly interested in quitting the Gotham Gazette to join the Daily Planet. And Perry White, who isn't very clearly not the biggest fan of her, does know that she is very skilled at what she does, and therefore knows that she would be a very good asset to the Daily Planet. So he basically assigns Lois and Jimmy to work with her on a case that she is currently working on. Perry specifically telling Lois to make sure that she is happy, make sure that she is basically interested in joining the Daily Planet. So while this is going on, Superman is continuously saving people, but he also hears the General's voice and finds out that he is very clearly up to something. Superman, not knowing exactly what it is, does what he can to basically listen again for his voice to find out. But he eventually hears that someone has actually escaped from his facility and that they can't track him down. So Superman goes looking for this person, and it turns out to be, I believe he was one of the members of Intergang, if I remember correctly, from several episodes before. But he has tech that essentially lets him turn himself invisible, and he's been using that tech to essentially rob places in order to get more resources to spring his siblings out of prison. And Superman, of course, wants to help, so he tracks the invisible person down. But unfortunately, he is so exhausted at this point that he ends up making even more mistakes. So he ends up crashing like into the floor several times, and then he also ends up trying to save this person while he's still invisible from a truck that's about to hit him. But in doing so, because no one sees this invisible person, what a lot of people think just happened is that Superman just went in front of a truck to stop it for absolutely no reason. This is all made even worse when Vicki Vale, it turns out, is her big story is Superman, and she's not looking to write an honest report about Superman. She's looking just to tear him down. Something very interesting about this version of Vicki Vale. Now, in the comic books, I believe like she's one of those characters who her likability is completely dependent on who's writing her. Very similar to a lot of, not gonna lie, a lot of female characters back in the day. If depending on who was writing her, sometimes she would be a reporter with integrity, other times not so much. And in the case of this specific show, she is a reporter with a really, really bad journalistic ethics, because she goes in knowing it already what side she's taking, and basically only taking in interviews that help her side of the story. Lois and Jimmy set up several interviews for her for people that Superman has saved, but the only one that she really listens to is the one from a guy named Alex, who, of course, I can't tell, or I'm not sure if this has been confirmed or not, but I do believe Alex is supposed to be Lex Luthor in this show, who's currently, I believe he's just an intern for Dr. Ivo at the moment. So a very different take on the character, and I am very curious, because his name is Alex, if it's supposed to be short for Alexander. So if he's supposed to be Lex Luthor's son, or if it is just supposed to be Lex Luthor, but he's around the same age as Superman, so he hasn't really fully developed. He definitely gives me kind of subtle vibes of the Jesse Eisenberg version of Lex Luthor, but in a very much more well written manner. Because if you know anything about me, you know that I think Dawn of Justice to me is one of the worst written superhero films like ever. And not only that, just honestly one of the worst written movies I think I've ever seen. And that version of Lex Luthor, I mean, I just really, really don't like. So you'd think that I would be happy if I saw a version of Lex Luthor that kind of reminded me of him. But in this particular case, I am willing to give the show the benefit of the doubt. So far, the way they're writing him, I thought was very interesting because his dialogue feels very similar to that of Batman's dialogue in that movie, Dawn of Justice. And I always said I thought that his character would have been so much more interesting if he was Lex Luthor. Some of the lines that Batman says to justify some of his like terrible actions that he takes in the movie, they don't feel like Batman lines. They feel a lot more like Lex Luthor lines, and it kind of made me think that Dawn of Justice just would have been a much better movie if you just took Batman out of the equation and just like everything that was written for Batman in that movie, you gave to Lex Luthor. And essentially, that's kind of what we're getting with Lex Luthor in My Adventures with Superman. The big argument that he uses is whether or not Superman is here to save the day or not. If a guy like him, a normal person has a bad day, they tend to act up. They have a tantrum. We all tend to act up, and it's fine because we know how to control it. It's very easy, for us, like as we grow up and become adults. Or I shouldn't say easy. Easy is the wrong word, but we learn how to cope with our emotions over time. But a guy like Superman, what would his emotions look like if they went out of control? If he had a really bad day and accidentally lost his temper and it could have caused the death of hundreds of people. Maybe everyone, not everyone, but every once in a while someone will get really mad and their anger, they'll take it out on a wall. They'll punch a wall and that'll be it. That'll be where their aggression goes into. Superman punching a wall could mean an entire building collapsing. That's kind of the argument that Lex Luthor is getting across. I don't agree with that argument, obviously, but of course, Vicki Vale, she is trying to get a very biased, look at Superman again. So she decides that Lex Luthor's interview. I know he hasn't been confirmed as Lex Luthor yet, but that's just what I'm going to call him right now. I'm just going to assume that Alex is Lex Luthor. Vicki Vale decides to go with Lex Luthor's version of the story, and then she writes her own article about it. But it's not for the Daily Planet like Lois and Jimmy Olsen were led to believe, along with Perry White. It turns out that she was actually writing this for the Gotham Gazette as a way to get herself promoted to editor-in-chief. So this is very much a very a very bad version of Vicki Vale in the sense that she has very bad journalistic ethics. And I can say that because even though I'm not a journalist, I would never call myself that. I did take a semester of journalism, and I do know certain things that you look for when it comes to good and bad ethics. And she definitely gives a very TMZ kind of vibe when it comes to her journalistic ethics. And if you don't know what TMZ is, good. That's all I have to say. So we cut back to Superman, and he finally does catch up with the member of Intergang that he was looking for with the invisible suit, and he does convince him that he's there to help him. So he wants to help free his siblings from the military place that they're being held. And he eventually finds out that they're being shipped on a mission. So he arrives into the not helicarrier, but I almost said helicarrier because it kind of reminds me of that, even though I think it's just like a regular helicopter, just made to look a little more, futuristic, because this is, after all, a fantasy DC universe. So he arrives there to free them, but of course, it turns out that very similar to Task Force X, they've all been given essentially a free release as long as they can accomplish this one assignment, which is, of course, taking down Superman. So all the villains that Superman has fought over the course of the season so far are basically teaming up against him, which of course is basically a bit too much for him. And it's not that Superman couldn't defeat all of them. He could, but the problem is when you have that many people ganging up on you, the only way you can be sure to take them down completely is to be a little more lethal, and Superman doesn't want to cross that line. That's not what Superman is, which is why the more that Sam Lane is insistent that Superman is the bad guy, it just makes you as the audience watching the show just that much more mad. Things are also like not helped with Lois necessarily. Like because in the previous episode, as we remember, she was given a data sphere that basically showed potential versions of Superman, versions of him where he is, the basically Superman that General Lane fears that he could be. So, when General Lane takes down Superman, doesn't even give him a chance to talk, basically shuts him up the moment that he is fully taken down. So doesn't even get to hear Superman, what he's actually there for. Unlike Lois, even when Lois in the very beginning suspected that Superman had a ulterior motive for the good that he was doing, she was still willing to at least listen to his side of the story, even if she didn't believe it per se. Whereas like the General just doesn't even want to hear a single word that he has to say. Something I also really love about seeing Lois with Vicki Vale in this episode is that Vicki Vale, in a lot of ways, kind of represents the reporter that Lois Lane could have turned into. Because if you remember in the very beginning of the show, who she was is not the same as who she is now. Lois Lane, very similar to what Vicki Vale is now, did kind of want to take down Superman's credibility. She did want to prove that he had his own selfish reasons for doing what he was doing. And it was only after learning that Superman was Clark Kent when she finally kind of eased up on that. Whereas Vicki Vale, she didn't have that experience with Superman. And it's safe to say that, over her years of reporting, she just kind of became that potential of what Lois could have been. She became that bad ethical journalist that, Lois could have been, but thankfully is so far on the right track to not becoming. Something I also got to give a shout out to with Vicki Vale in this is that it really does help expand this universe, because even though this is a Superman show, we've already seen characters outside the Superman mythos, like for example, like we did get the Gorilla and the Brain from Doom Patrol, which I thought was really awesome. And now with Vicki Vale, there's several name drops when it comes to Gotham. Obviously, her working with the Gotham Gazette, and also the fact that I think the Falcons get mentioned. Apparently she helped take them down. And then on top of that, there's even a name drop for the Queen Industries. I guess there was a money scandal that she was able to unveil to the world. So it is cool that even though this is a Superman show, it is taking place in a very fully realized DC universe. And that's, of course, not even to mention the hundreds and hundreds of Easter eggs we've probably gotten with Jimmy Olsen and all of his different conspiracy theories. Absolutely love that aspect of the show. Another thing I got to give a shout out to is Perry White. I really loved him in this episode because even though, yes, at the end of the day, he is a business person, he is definitely in there trying to make profit for the Daily Planet. I do like that he is definitely a journalist with good ethics in the long run, because, and you can tell this because of his interactions with Vicki Vale. While yes, he wanted Vicki Vale to work with the Daily Planet, for just because it would help boost their sales and all that stuff. There is a part of him that does also tend to take Lois's and Jimmy Olsen's side, when it comes to their integrity. And this is shown not just in this episode, but in many episodes before. The fact that he hasn't fired either of them yet, even though they've kind of gone against, his orders a lot of times. So, even though it's very subtle and you don't see much of it, it is something that I really like. And I do hope that, even if we don't get one this season, I do hope we get kind of more focus on Perry White in this in this show, especially because the other journalists that we kind of get, I believe Lombard, Cat Grant, and I can't remember. There was a third one I don't remember, but they all kind of had that Vicki Vale vibe in the sense that they were all in it for an interesting story and not to report the actual truth out there. So it is something I hope they kind of get to explore later on in the show. So the episode unfortunately ends with Superman being captured by the military, and Lois and Jimmy are basically powerless to do anything about it. My predictions on where this could lead to the next episode: obviously Lois doesn't know that her dad is the general that has taken Superman, but she does know that her dad is a general regardless. So I'm wondering if she is going to finally reach out to her dad, something that she has never done throughout the series, because it's implied that something happened between the two of them and they just don't get along anymore. So I am very curious if maybe she'll try to reach out to her dad in order to convince him to, reach out to the other general who she thinks is responsible for capturing Superman to let him go or something like that. I'm very curious and how she's going to react when she finds out that her dad is the general behind all the, weapons. And then, of course, I'm just going to call him Task Force X, even though they haven't been referred to that yet. But also finding out that her dad is responsible for Task Force X and the capture of Superman. I'm very curious to see how that's all going to go down. But overall, guys, a great episode. Definitely looking forward to seeing how this concludes next week with part 2. But of course, at the end of the day, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think. So definitely let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But of course, guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.